We'll get going. Good morning and welcome to the second installment of the Tri-State Dairy Exchange webinar series. We're excited to have my good friend and coordinator of the Ben & Jerry's Low Carbon Dairy Program, Rebecca Manning, joining us today. Shortly, we will be diving into the details of this project, as well as touching on the mission of Ben & Jerry's and their place in the Northeast dairy supply chain. Just a quick reminder that we will be covering some great topics and hosting several speakers over the next few months. If you're watching this as a recording or would like to share the registration link for future webinars, please scan the QR code. Registration is also available on the conferences and events page of the UVM Extension Northwest Crops and Soils website. And all recorded sessions will be posted to the Northwest Crops and Soils YouTube channel. The Tri-State Dairy Team was established in 2021 with the goal of joining forces of extension dairy programs and outreach across New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. Our mission is to advance dairy management, address industry challenges, and foster innovation through collaborative educational programs across New England. Our team is comprised of 4 extension members across the three states. Dr. Glenda Pereira is the dairy specialist for the University of Maine Extension, and she also teaches animal genetics. Sarah Allen works for the University of New Hampshire Extension and is the state dairy specialist. And Whitney Hull and I make up the UVM Extension Dairy Team, working with farms across the state to provide technical assistance for all scales and management types of dairy production. March is a busy month for conferences and events. Sarah, what's going on in New Hampshire?
So on March 18th, we have our grain production farmer to farmer discussion. And then on March 27th, we have our New Hampshire dairy seminar.
So in the state of Maine, we also have a few events upcoming. You can listen to our FarmCast episodes. If you're a podcast listener, that's a good way to find out more information about what's going on in our state. But in addition, we have the upcoming Maine Dairy Seminar on Wednesday, March 19th. Our program starts at 9 a.m. And during that event, we will be doing a workshop focused on succession planning. And so you'll be able to get a lot of good information for how to start beginning steps for succession planning and business planning.
And I believe that Sarah is going to drop the registration information and details for those 2 events into our chat. For Vermont, the Northwest Crops and Soils team will be facilitating our 2025 Organic Dairy Day on 3 dates at 3 locations across the state. The same speakers and topics will be at each spot, and it's going to be packed with information. Nutrition consultant Kurt Kotant will be diving into rumen function and the nutritional needs of grass-fed cows, as well as forage quality assessment. Grazing consultant Sarah Flack will cover factors that influence forage and pasture quality and management. And Jen Miller from NOFA Vermont will provide an update on the organic dairy cost of production study. The locations are Newport on March 5th, White River Junction on March 6th, and in Virgins on March 20th. And you can register on the events page of the Northwest Crops and Soils website. Additionally, the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets is facilitating an in-person listening tour in March, April, and May at locations across the state. These sessions will be an opportunity for those involved in the state's dairy industry to express their thoughts, concerns, and ideas and hopes for the future of Vermont dairy. Each meeting will include a working portion focused on putting ideas into short-term, near-term, and long-term priority levels. And in addition, virtual sessions will be offered in April and May for particular dairy focus groups, including young and beginning dairy farmers, goat and sheep dairy farmers, dairy processors, and a general dairy audience. The full schedule for the tour is available on the agency's webpage, which is where this QR code will bring you if you give it a scan. And if we have resolved our technical issues, we're going to jump into today's topic. Rebecca Manning is our guest speaker today, and this conversation is really special because Rebecca and I have worked together and been good friends for the better part of the last 20 years. We've been close through a lot of life's milestones and transitions, and so when I transitioned into my role with UVM Extension about 1.5 years ago, I was really excited to be working with Rebecca again, and also with this group of 7 farms that are all part of our dairy community here in Northwestern Vermont. The UVM North Extension Northwest Crops and Soils team has worked with the low carbon dairy program since its beginning back in 2021 to conduct research, provide technical expertise, and collect data to support the farm partners and the goals for this program. This is the final year of this program, and it's shaping up to be super impactful as we continue to work with farmers to implement some of the changes that we've identified and evaluate what we have learned. So Rebecca, if you want to share your screen.
Cross our fingers and see if this works.
And if there are questions during Rebecca's presentation, please drop them into the chat and we'll plan for questions, answers, and conversation at the end of her slides.
Does this look like it is working the way that we want it to?
Looks good, Rebecca.
Okay, perfect. So good morning and welcome to what I'm calling sustainability from a brand's point of view. And this is going to be a look at the Ben & Jerry's low carbon dairy program. I hope that you can all hear me. I apologize for my voice. I was voiceless for a couple weeks and slowly coming back to me. So as Amber said, my name is Rebecca Manning. I am the coordinator of the Ben & Jerry's low carbon dairy program. I was born and raised in Franklin County, Vermont. I grew up on my family's farm in Swanton. After graduating from UVM, I worked as an area reproductive tech with ABS for about 2 years. And then I transitioned into that herdsman role. We milked just over 500 cows on the farm in Swanton and cropped about 1,000 acres. I worked with my brothers, my dad, and my grandparents on the farm, and my brothers and my dad are still doing that today. In 2022, I transitioned to this role with Ben & Jerry's, where I still get to work with some of the farms that I have known my whole life. And as Amber said, I get to work with her now too. And my favorite Ben & Jerry's ice cream flavor, if you are wondering, is called Peanut Butter World. So before we get into the low carbon dairy program, I think that it is important to first get a little bit of a background on our company values and mission. So Ben & Jerry's operates on a 3-part mission, and Ben & Jerry decided that that was important when they started the business back in 1978, because they knew that business was an integral mover in the world. So they created this 3-part mission to help their company be both successful and something that they could be proud of. So part of that 3-part mission is the product mission, the economic mission, and the social mission. So the product mission is based around creating a high quality product, creating the best ice cream that we can produce. The economic mission, this is a business, and it is important that the business is sustainable and that it is sustainable financially and that it continues to grow. And the social mission is something that is very important to Ben & Jerry's, and the social mission says that business really plays that key piece in society, and that is a place where Ben & Jerry's can help create an impact. So through that social mission, we work to support sustainable and safe methods of food production, that will reduce environmental degradation, that will maintain the productivity of the land now and over time for future generations. And we also want to make sure that we're supporting the economic viability of both the family farms and the rural communities that the farms are in. So an anchor of our sustainability and social programming is the Caring Dairy Program. So the Caring Dairy Program is really the anchor of our dairy programming. The Caring Dairy Program was founded in Europe in 2006 and in the US in 2011. And over the years, that program has evolved from a holistic, excuse me, from a holistic practice-based program to more of an impact-based program. And the Caring Dairy Program, as I had said, is a holistic program that covers everything from environmental, labor, and animal care standards. And we have a history of leadership through this program, from farm labor standards to progressive cropping practices to all of the farm metrics data collection. And now when we're looking at on-farm greenhouse gas emissions calculations as part of that program. The Caring Dairy Program has 4 pillars to it. Those pillars are dignified livelihoods, where we partner with the Milk with Dignity Standards Council to look at and create a linked prosperity between farm owners and farm employees. And we really value the fair labor standards there. We've worked with Milk with Dignity to implement a minimum cash wage on farms to make sure that all of the farms in the program have dignified housing for their workers, and also fair labor practices like vacation time and sick time. We partner with the Global Animal Partnership, known as GAP, in the Excellent Life for Cows pillar, and the standards in that GAP certification process include things like paired housing for calves and mandatory enrichments for all ages of animals on the farm. In the regenerative and circulative ag category, we really focus on that correlation between the land, the crops, and the animals. So we look at, reducing synthetic inputs, seeing what we can do to sequester carbon in the soils, and also working to maximize the homegrown forages in the diet. So that's maximizing the quantity and the quality of those forages. And then the newest pillar to our Caring Dairy Program is the low carbon pillar. And here we are looking at farm level greenhouse gas emissions. And so this is really a whole farm approach to reduce the footprints on the farm while also increasing farm resilience. As part of this, we have been working with each of the farms in the program to calculate annual greenhouse gas footprints for the farms. And this low carbon pillar is what we're really going to focus on later in this presentation. So Caring Dairy has created change, and we have seen a lot of positive change through this program. Through Caring Dairy, the 2024 impact, which, as you'll note in the bottom of the screen, is based on the 2023 cropping season. Over 75% of the corn acres in the program were planted with cover crops. More than 50% of the farms were GAP certified through the Global Animal Partnership, and all of the farms completed the GAP audit as part of the Caring Dairy Program. And then with the annual crops that were planted, more than 86% of those were planted using no-till or shallow till planting methods. I think that it is also interesting to note how the Caring Dairy program really impacts the rest of the state as well. So these are numbers from our 2023 cropping season. And when you dig into some of the numbers from the state of Vermont, the most recent numbers I could find were from 2020. But when you compare the Caring Dairy acres to the entire state of Vermont in 2020, about a third of the acres that were cover cropped were in the Caring Dairy program. And the same when you look at conservation tillage and you compare the Caring Dairy program to the state of Vermont in that same 2020 year, about 80% of the acres that were planting using conservation, that were tilled using conservation tillage were in the Caring Dairy program. So the program is having a big impact. And then it's having an impact at the individual farm level as well. So we have a quote here from one of the farms in the program who said that if Caring Dairy hadn't supported the transition to no-till planting, his farm would have lost half of their topsoil on the river bottom land during the July 2023 floods. We've also heard from farms and seen that, so this is 2023, when we look back to 2011, which is when Caring Dairy started in the US, which is when Tropical Storm Irene came through, we have heard anecdotally from the farms that they saw significantly greater damage, worse results during that Hurricane Irene than they have in some of the recent flooding. And they attribute that change to some of the practices that they have implemented through the Caring Dairy program. So why now? Why does Ben & Jerry's want to tackle emissions in our supply chain now? We just saw that some of the farmers have noted positive change. And as you all know, we have seen more severe weather events in recent years than normal. In the last decade, we've seen more than one 100-year flooding event. So when we look at the Ben & Jerry's footprint, I think that it's important for people to know that we're not just putting a microscope on the farms that are in our supply chain, that we're also looking internally at our own carbon footprint as well. And you might be surprised when you look at this pie chart to see that ice cream ingredients and product packaging accounts for more than 75% of all of Ben & Jerry's greenhouse gas emissions. So for those reasons, we need to look at this now. It's also important to realize that dairy is often portrayed in the media as being a root of the problem, that it is shown as being a key piece of, environmental destruction. But at Ben & Jerry's, we realize that if we bring together the dairy industry, if we bring in academics, if we bring in folks from the government and tech partners, that we can work with farms to deploy cutting-edge technology. We can bring technical assistance to the farms. And through this support, we can change the headlines. When we make these changes on the farm, we can see real change, and we can bring that and we can show the world that dairy is not necessarily the problem, but it can be part of the solution. So that's when the low carbon dairy program comes in. The low carbon dairy program is the program that Ben & Jerry's created, and it was introduced and kicked off in 2022. And it works with farms in both the US and Europe to tackle all of these changes holistically and look at the whole farm. And then down the road, we would like to take successful interventions and scale those across our supply chain. So the low carbon dairy project, as I stated, started in 2022. It's a 3-year pilot program that will run through 2025. There are 7 farms in the program in northern Vermont and 10 farms in the program in the Netherlands. As you can see on the chart here, there is quite a bit of variation in the herd size in the US. The herds that we're working with here vary from about 60 cows to just under 1,000. And in the Netherlands, you'll see that those farms are a little bit smaller and more concise in the number of cows on them. So they range from about 75 to 400 cows there. There are a few goals of the program when we kicked off in 2022. Some of those were to see if we could reduce the on-farm greenhouse gas footprint by 50% below the industry average. But like with the Ben & Jerry's 3-part mission, we don't want to elevate that goal above everything else on the farm. It's important to us that while we are trying to drive down emissions, we are also optimizing the farm productivity and financial performance, and also increasing farm resilience. And like I said, the long-term goal of this program is to take the learnings and feasible interventions and scale those across our greater supply chain. You'll see in the chart there that we broke the farm down into 7 different intervention areas, and we will get into those in significantly greater detail in just a minute. So the farms that are in the program in the US, I'm going to speak predominantly to the US program. Those farms are located in Franklin and Grand Isle counties. You'll see that they are all located within 30 miles of the Ben & Jerry's plant in St. Albans. And you may ask how these farms were selected to be part of the program. So 1, the location relevant to the plant was a key selection criteria for us. But there were other farm attributes that could make a farm a good partner, as we knew that this was going to be an intensive 3-year pilot. So we wanted farms that we knew would collaborate with us, that would be excellent communicators through the process. We have brought groups of various sizes out to the farms, from a handful of people up to, near 100 people congregating on one farm for the day. And we needed to have farms that would be open to that kind of intrusion. And we also wanted to work with farms who could see the benefit of this, that they were also motivated in this area as well. I think that it's also important to note here that in no way were these farms cherry-picked to be part of this program so that we would meet our goals and see the greatest reductions. That we really had looked at location and making sure that we were choosing farms that were going to be really great partners. You remember from the farm size, we are working with farms of various sizes and various management styles, all the way from 60 to 1,000 cows, from small robot facilities to large freestall facilities. Some of the farms raise all of their own young stock. Some of them do not. So the farms are all very different in that regard. So these are those intervention areas that we had looked at with the farm. So we broke it down into 7 areas. There is enteric emissions, manure management, regenerative agriculture, nutritious homegrown feed, renewables, animal welfare and longevity, and nature and biodiversity. As we have been working with the farms over the last 2.5 years, we have realized that some of these categories overlap quite significantly, and it has been difficult to attribute some interventions specifically to one area, but that hasn't been a critical problem for us. I'd also point out that through this pilot that we have learned that this is as much about the process as anything else. And it's really not about perfection, which has been a big learning for me as part of this, is that at the beginning, it seemed like it could be pretty cut and dry to work with the farms to implement interventions in some of these areas. But there's been a lot of learnings there, and there's really not been a lot that's been cut and dry through the process. So let's dig right into those intervention categories and talk about what we have been doing on the farms and what we have learned. So when we talk about enteric emissions, I think that sometimes it is important to talk about what that means. So enteric emissions are just emissions that are associated with the natural rumination process that the cow's doing every day. So if you think about a cow that is happy, healthy, doing what you want her to be doing, she's going to be ruminating for 10, 12, maybe more hours in one day. And that is where the enteric emissions come from. Obviously, we don't want to reduce the amount of time that the cows are ruminating. One of the things that we have looked at in this area is trialing different enteric methane reducing feed additives. We have collaborated with a company called Blue Ocean Barns, and they are working to bring a product forward that is a red seaweed based feed additive, and it could significantly reduce enteric emissions. When you look at this pie graph that is on here, you'll see that surprisingly, maybe to some folks, manure is not the biggest piece of the puzzle. That enteric emissions account for between 40 and 50% of the emissions on the farm. So finding a viable enteric solution is really key to meeting the goals to reduce the on-farm emissions by 50%. Last year, Bovaer received approval for use in the US, and Bovaer is a feed additive that can reduce those enteric emissions. It had previously been approved in Europe, and the farms that we are working with in the Netherlands have been feeding Bovaer on their farms, some of them for over a year. We do remain hopeful for approval of more feed additives and for this to become a more competitive market. 2 of the farms that we are working with were part of a trial that we worked with DFA on, where they fed Agalin on their farms, which is another enteric emission reducing additive. And they fed that in the trial off and on for about 18 months, and that trial wrapped up last year. Manure management, as if you remember from, I'll flip back to this pie graph here, manure is the second biggest chunk of the pie. So if you look at enteric and manure, it's almost 3/4 of the on-farm emissions. So manure management is another area where it's important to be able to make some headway if you are going to see the reductions that we wanted to on the farms. This is an area where we have learned a lot over the last 2.5 years. You'll see in the picture here with the box out front and then kind of the Hershey Kiss in the background, that is a bioelectric digester. There are a few of the farms that we're working with in the Netherlands that have these digesters, and they've been very successful there. We have one of these digesters on one of the low carbon farms in the United States, and we have struggled to get successful manure interventions onto all of the farms for multiple reasons. One, as I'm sure many of you know, these manure technologies are incredibly expensive, and they also require some manpower to keep them running successfully. And that has been a challenge on the farms, is that many or all of the farms don't have an excess of skilled labor available to maintain a digester or separator on their farms. So through the program, we have worked with the farms to assess the manure technologies that are out there and where it makes sense on the farms and it's viable to implement those manure solutions. But like I had said at the beginning, is that this really isn't a one size fits all approach, and we are not pressuring the farms to implement technology or interventions on their farms that don't make sense for the farm. With the regenerative agriculture category, we have worked really closely with the UVM extension team, and we've built on all of the work that the farms have done through the Caring Dairy program. So we've continued to encourage them to rotate their crops, to cover crop, to do more no-till and minimum tilling. But we've also worked with the farms on some things that are a little bit different. All of the farms have perennial grass stands, and oftentimes those grass fields, some of them just stay grass forever, and nobody really thinks about them again. Nobody gives them a second thought. And through what we've learned with UVM, we've worked with the farms to renovate those grasslands. And so they have used a diverse seed mix, and they have drilled into those perennial stands to rejuvenate them and see if we can increase, like I said earlier, both the quantity and the quality of the crops that we're getting from those fields. We worked with the farms in 2023 and 2024 crop seasons to renovate the fields. And at this point, almost 20% of the grassland in the program has been renovated. In 2023, we worked with each of the farms to trial manure urease inhibitors with the application of liquid manure on their grass fields. And those trials continued in 2024 at a little bit of a smaller level. We've also worked with the farms and UVM to both pull PSNT tests and to believe in what those PSNT tests are telling them and follow through with fertilizer application rates as recommended. Regen Ag ties really closely to nutritious homegrown feed. So as I said, we've worked to rejuvenate those perennial grass stands to increase the quantity and the quality of the feed available to the cows. We have also looked at the quality of that feed all the way from the field to the bunk. So we have worked closely again with the farms and UVM to baseline feed loss. We also worked with Aurochs to use drone technology as a part of that baseline, as well as the farms feeding software that they are using, so we know, what's fed out and, what's the missing piece there that we can assume is feed loss. Through that, Ben & Jerry's has worked with the farms to make feed storage improvements, whether that is looking at bunk floors or adding additional feed storage so that feed can be segregated. And then also looking at forage quality, a key piece to reducing the carbon footprint on the farms once you get past, the enteric and the manure, is fat and protein corrected milk. So anything that we can do with the farms to increase fat and protein corrected milk is really a key driver of the carbon footprint on the farms. We worked with the farms to implement regular use of a SioCup so that they can regularly check dry matters and make adjustments to the rations basically on the fly. And we have also worked with the farms for more regular feed push-ups, and on some of the farms that has been with a robotic feed pusher. Renewables are, to me, I guess, a surprisingly smaller piece of the puzzle than I would have assumed. But we worked with a third-party firm to do level 2 energy audits on each of the farms. And then we've worked with the farms to take the results from those audits and make improvements. We have also worked with a few of the farms. 2 of the farms have put rooftop solar arrays on, and there is 1 more farm that is in the process of putting up an array right now. With the animal welfare and longevity category, as I said at the beginning, the Caring Dairy Program works with the Global Animal Partnership to have all of the farms audited and moving towards certification through that process. We also worked with the low carbon farms with the Novus group, and Novus came out and they did a cows assessment on each of the farms. And that cows assessment led to farmer-led changes such as, regrooving alleys, adjusting neck rails, working with farms for proper dimensions for a new facility, and also looking at farms that were retrofitting an old facility to look at their cow size and then what are the current recommendations that they should be looking at for stalls, increasing the timing of hoof trimmer visits, all changes that really were farmer driven through that Novus program, but will lead to changes in the fat and protein corrected milk through improvements to animal welfare. And then the last category that we had looked at was nature and biodiversity. And in this category, we have worked with each of the farms to complete the Cool Farm Tool biodiversity module. So Cool Farm Tool is the tool that we are utilizing to calculate the carbon footprints on the farms. And we put the information in there. We have a baseline for each of the farms, And we are exploring a means to recognize the dairy farms for those non-farmed acres. So when we look at those intervention areas over the last 2.5 years, looking back longer over the Caring Dairy program, has it done anything? And it has. So when we look at soil health and we look at low carbon dairy farms compared to the state of Vermont as a whole, we see that we've driven positive change. We've increased water capacity in these fields. We've decreased surface and subsurface hardness. We've increased aggregate stability in the physical soil health. And then we've also increased organic matter, soil respiration, and active carbon in the biological soil health. If you look at the soil carbon storage on these seven low carbon farms, there is over 17,000 metric tons of carbon stored in the soils. So what does that mean? That is the equivalent to the amount of energy consumed by more than 8,000 homes in a year. So these farms are doing great things. And then as a whole, where has our carbon footprint gone? So the program started in 2022, but we are comparing to a 2015 baseline. And when you look at the 2022 carbon footprints of the farms in the program, they averaged a 16% reduction since that 2015 baseline. I will note that we are working to accurately calculate 2023 and 2024 footprints. I did say that we are working with Cool Farm Tool to calculate these. And one of the challenges with this project, specific to the US, has been accurately calculating on-farm footprints in a way that is feasible, not cumbersome on the farm level, but that is also providing the level of detail and accurate data to create a footprint that is valid. So for those reasons and those challenges, that is why our program has remained holistically based and is not a payment per intervention based program. And then to summarize, the farmers in the Caring Dairy and Low Carbon Dairy programs are definitely driving positive impacts across all of the pillars, all of the intervention areas. We are so proud of the farms who step up and collaborate with us through these programs. We are continuing to learn with them and will continue to implement new strategies. And we are definitely looking forward to scaling the interventions that are successful and feasible across the low carbon dairy program in the future. The program and our approach is constantly evolving, and we continue to learn more and we continue to try new things with the farms. And Amber, that sums it up. I don't know if you have more slides or if we are open to questions.
Yeah, if you want to stop sharing your screen, folks that have questions, if you want to drop them into the chat, or you can just speak up, that would be super. Rebecca, which of the 7 interventions do you think will be most easily scalable across non-program farms when you move forward with this work?
You didn't
Where
preface
would
this
you
by
start?
telling me that you were going to ask difficult questions.
Oh, I thought that was an easy one.
I think that it depends. I think that for me, one of the most exciting intervention categories is the enteric category. And as time goes on and more technologies are approved, I think that that may be more easily implemented on the farms and more commonplace. Until that happens, I think that looking at the regen ag categories and the nutritious homegrown feed and really doing everything that we can to drive fat and protein corrected milk is going to be, the areas that are most easily replicated.
Super. I agree. Like, I think this is really going to be hard. It's really a farm by farm approach that you have to take. So, there's a couple questions in the chat here. Carol asked, do you have any results to share from farms in the Netherlands?
I don't have slides to share. They have seen a more significant drop than we have in the US. But I would add that, I mean, almost all of the farms in the Netherlands are feeding an enteric feed additive. And several of the farms there have also implemented manure management technologies. And that is not, necessarily because the farms there are more progressive or willing to do things that the farms here are not, but farms in the US and in the Northeast, it wasn't that long ago that I was on the farm, and we feel like we're pretty heavily regulated here. And the farms in the Netherlands are regulated to a degree that we cannot imagine here. So they have been pushed to, use those enteric feed additives and have those manure solutions on their farms to stay in business.
Thanks. There's another question in the chat from Evan, which might be a little bit tricky. What is your anticipated timeline for working with Blue Ocean Barns and implementing feed additives?
So we've been partnering with Blue Ocean Barns for several years, and they are working to get their product approved through the FDA. So until that happens, that's not an option for us. Anything that's fed to the cows on the farms that we're working with needs to be FDA approved. So that's out of our control right now. As for other enteric methane suppressing feed additives, as I said, 2 of the farms did do a trial with Agalin, and we are hopeful that we might have a couple farms this year that will begin use of Bovaer, since that was approved in May of last year in the US, and then a few months later that was approved for use in Vermont as well.
Super. I think that looks like that's all we have for questions. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rebecca. Susan has dropped in our chat a link to the survey for this webinar. We would really appreciate it if you took just a couple minutes to provide some feedback to us so that we can plan our upcoming sessions to meet your needs. Up next in this series on March 26th, we'll be spotlighting the Farm of the Year awardees from New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. Each of our states have similar programs that identify, award, and celebrate dairy farms that go above and beyond. And so Sarah, Glenda, and Whitney will explain more about the history of this program, how the farms are identified or nominated, and then evaluated and chosen for the title of Farm of the Year. And they will also be sharing about the 2025 awardees for each state. And that's all we have today. Thank you for joining us for the February session of the Tri-State Dairy Exchange webinar series. Again, we'd really appreciate your feedback as we move forward with planning future sessions. If there are topics that you would like to hear more about, please share with us by taking this quick survey before you move on with the rest of your day. You can either scan the QR code here or click the link that Susan has shared in the chat. We thank you so much and have a great day.